Hey guys, Streams here, coming at you with another review. This time I'm reviewing the Index Imperium 2, and I'm gonna focus on the Astra Militarum army list part and some additional stuff that affects Astra Militarum. So it's not a pure review in that sense, it's everything that you should know about them in a combination, since they're Imperium, and that's a very high variety of units and sub-factions of a kind, but they all ally together as one in the end. Alright, so let's see what Astra Militarum has to offer. First of all, as everything in the new edition, they have regiments, so as long as you're not from the same regiment, you're not affected by special abilities and the like. There's also 2 or 3 preset extras that you cannot change. So regiment is not a keyword across the entire army. For example, Ogrin and Ratlings are auxilia, so you cannot do anything with them, and they don't get affected unless it's Astra Militarum units. Regiment is something different. Militarum Tempestus is also a specialized version of this, but they have their own datasheet, and the Codex Militarum Tempestus is pretty much gone. It's all inside of this index. Now there's very important stuff here on the first page, which is why I have it open. Voice of command means you can still order, but you can only issue infantry units, so no Rough Riders or something like that, and they have to have the same regiment keyword as this unit, which means they have to have the regiment keyword. The unit that orders this is always a commander, platoon commander, or Tempestus HQ, so they will have a regiment or Militarum Tempestus, which means Ogrins and the like are all excluded from orders, no matter what. As you can see here, you have to be within 6 inches. You issue an order, you pick the target unit, and then see what you want, but every unit may only take 1 order as always. Note that there's no requirement here. You don't have to take leadership tests or anything special like that. First one is reroll hits rolls of 1 for all models in the ordered unit. Obviously this is big for blobs guardsmen. This is good for plasma weaponry, and especially important because you have access to cheap plasma and with high mobility in Militarum Tempestus units. This is one of the most useful orders, I'd say. Second one is the exact opposite. All lasguns and hotshot lasguns change their type rapid fire to instead of 1 until the end of the phase. Now mention here until the end of the phase is every time the wording here, not for Overwatch and the like. This is obviously huge for conscript blobs, because they profit more from double the shots than anything else. And it's also good for units that have very few special weapons. For example, for double meta, for Militarum Tempestus, I'd still prefer the rerolls of 1, because the meta is such a huge impact weapon, and very expensive too. But for mixed guardsman groups with maybe 1 flame or something like that, you can go with first rank fire, second rank fire pretty often. And it obviously is better than take aim in many senses where you actually can use it. There's only one downside to this for using this with Militarum Tempestus, which is why I was talking about the meta guns. The issue is if you drop in from reserves, you have the problem that you're outside of 9 inches, which is your rapid fire range. So you're not getting your 4 hotshot lasgun shots, which would be great since they have good ballistic skill by themselves, so the amount of shots is actually very relevant to them. So the order doesn't do much here. It can only be used in the second turn after, or if you run them inside of some kind of vehicle, which is Taurox Prime mostly. You also can go with something like maybe, let's say, Valkyrie is something weird, but essentially you're most of the time out of rapid fire range, and that order is not as big of a deal as the first one, because that one does not specify the weaponry you have to use. Also good for plasma pistols, which you can run on every single guy you have, and they're very inexpensive. Next thing is reroll wound rolls of 1 for all models in the ordered unit until the end of the phase. Sounds good, but the other ones are strictly better most of the time. The rerolling wound rolls is actually pretty nice if you somehow get the first benefit anyway. So let's say you have Commissars around or somebody else that gets you to reroll once. In this case, we'll bring it down as a very valuable order since it increases your damage output. Since everything else would be a little bit redundant. But to match this, you have to have a bad situation for take aim, or already covered, and a bad situation for first rank, second rank fire. And that is not a lot of situations, to be honest. That's something when you have a huge buff going on, and maybe this will get more relevant when the Astra Militarum gets an own codex and not an index book. Because if you get the ability to reroll hits somehow, this order is actually pretty nice. Next one, a very underrated one, I fear. Forwards for the Emperor. The Ordnance unit can shoot this phase even if it advances in its movement phase. That's nice. So you can go for a mix of movement and shooting. If the first one is just movement with massive shooting, this one is the next one. And it's directly linked with move, skipping the other order. Instead of shooting this phase, the unit immediately moves as if it were the movement phase and must advance as part of this move and cannot declare a charge during this turn. So these are the options we have. Massive shooting, mix of running and shooting, and huge attack, huge push forward without any shooting whatsoever. And without charging, obviously, but that's actually usual, right? The thing is, it's not exactly like this. The can shoot even if it advances in the movement phase is really nice if you want to go into that final distance of rapid fire where you feel that rapid fire is going to be more effective than rerolling once, which is pretty often the case, to be honest, unless the enemy is right in your face, in which case you can try to run away as far as you can and then shoot some models off to get even more distance. But yeah, you know, what you have to see is move does not hinder you with the shooting if you have assault weapons. So if you're going heavy on the flamer train and all that stuff, you can still use your weapons in a big push forward in an assault. -1 ballistic skill, yes, but you know the most of the flamer weaponry, for example, is a assault weapon. So don't disregard this as the I can move thing. Move is bigger in that sense because denying the table with conscripts, for example, is really important, and conscripts have one disability in the old edition, or I had, and don't have it anymore, because they couldn't move very far. The Death Star has to be moving very quickly because it has to seize table control as fast as possible, and conscripts are pretty decent if you kit them out with everything, and support, I mean, because I don't have any upgrades, obviously. But this is what fixes one of the issues. Basically, they're moving 12 inches plus 2d6 because they could advance with the first move and the second move because it's not prohibited. And obviously, that covers a lot of ground for some smaller units. This also means they will leave behind some guys. Don't forget that too. Because, as I said, you cannot order anything like that to an officer that doesn't have a regiment and everything. And we will see the keyword is very important here. Next thing is get back in the fight. You can shoot this phase and even fall back in the movement phase is a variation of the advanced thing. Basically means even if the enemy pushes everything forward and tries to get in range with you, he basically has to surround your army in order for you to not be able to fall back, or you have to misposition yourself. That means you can try to run small units of flood breaking units, let's say, and as soon as the enemy comes in, they can break away from the fight and even fire if they want to. But obviously this means also a big buff for conscripts, so they don't get stuck with something they can barely hurt. They can still move back. Yes, they're firing less than before, but it's better than nothing, no matter what. So this is a last resort, some sort of order. And the last one is you can only issue this unit to a unit that is within 1 inch of an enemy unit, and you can immediately fight as if it were the fight phase. Now this is a little bit iffy because obviously the guys profiting most from this would be cavalry and ogrins, and they can't take any orders. So the best I can imagine here is having a Ministome Priest giving you at least 2 basic attacks, and then giving your sergeants and the like some cheap power weapons. This can actually make a difference there. But then again, you're equipping your guardsmen with melee weapons, which is, unless the meta is very, very melee favored, not a good idea. Because most of the time you will try to gun them down, not clop them down if you can. But nonetheless, I think it's the worst order of them all. But it's not useless or something like that. If you're getting stuck, if you're getting surrounded, fixed bayonets might be able to give you the chance. And also, don't forget, it's a start of the shooting phase commando, so you still have to issue orders before doing anything else. Otherwise, you can't order anything, because it's not the start of your round anymore. If you have the ability to get multiple orders going, you can do that, but you have to do one at a time, which is also pretty nice. Most of this stuff requires you to shoot in 1 unit and so on. In the old edition, this is all gone. So this is these are some very, very free orders, so to say. As you can see with the wargear, our wargear is actually tiny, like really, really tiny. Bolt gun, bolt pistols are still viable upgrades. It costs only 1 point. Plasma pistol got much better. It's not as expensive as before, 7 points, but most of the time it's going to be too inefficient unless you put it on guys that have ballistic skill 3. In this case, it obviously would deal some damage at close range, maybe. Especially if you're playing Militarum Tempestus, you can consider running plasma pistols, since you will be dropping and you have good ballistic skill, and you have guys that can take hot shot gun pistols in advance. So that's a pretty bad option. So a plasma pistol could actually go a long way. Then the special weapons are sniper rifles, flamer, grenade launchers, melter gun, plasma gun. The grenade launcher, in my opinion, is still bad as it is. The flamer, so-so. On average, that's 3 hits, which is not bad for a guardsman, but you're paying points. And I'm not sure if first rank, second rank, and buffs wouldn't be better. But obviously plasma guns are great. Plasma guns got buffed. They're cheaper for you. They go up to strength 8, which mows down special marines still. They don't have much saves against this. Melter gun, most of the time not a very good option for your guys, but maybe for Tempestus or Chimera support. The heavy weapons are pretty much the same as before, with some buffs to the heavy bolter. And the Militarum melee weapons, there's only something to say about this, which is they are cheap. They're really, really cheap now. So it is much less of a cost problem of getting these. The problem is we can't put infantry squads together, so to get a decent melee blob, guardsman blob is still hard, but maybe in another codex, I don't know. We'll see. Alright, Company Commander, one of the best units you have. He's armed with less pistol, chainsaw, frag grenades, so is a wimp in close combat pretty much. He has ballistic skill 3 though, so remember this plasma pistol that we saw can be good on him. But the real reason you take him is obviously he has voice of command, he is a senior officer, and he has the regiment keyword, which means he can order. And he can order twice each turn. So this guy can be hidden inside of your infantry, because he's a character as well. He's rocking that 5+ invuln save just in case somebody tries to kill him, and it's a good thing too, because he only has a 5+ save. So killing him is pretty easy, but he's absolutely cheap. That's the big upside of him. Like 30 points-ish, depending on upgrades, is cheap as hell, even for a HQ unit. So, in my opinion, never take 1, take 2. It's always viable to have another one, because there's snipers and there's accidents and deep striking. Always good to have 2 of them. The tank commander is the same as the other commander. It's made to buff people, but it's a Leman Russ. So Leman Russ is still the same as before. It's tough as nails because toughness 8, 12 wounds, 3+ save makes it pretty hard to bring down with normal arms fire. Obviously, the usual melter gun and the like can still hurt you very badly. But toughness 8 is just the point where melter guns get less effective and where plasma guns get much less effective, no matter if overcharged or not. And that's a big point, plus point for the Leman Russ. However, the Leman Russ is quite expensive, and depending on what kind of wargear you want to run, he's even more expensive. And the tank commander on top of it is even a little bit more expensive. But don't get fooled, the tank commander is still more cost efficient than a normal Leman Russ. Very simple why. He hits better. He has ballistic skill 3, 4, 5, so he hits +1 above all other Leman Russ variants, and if you take Pask, obviously it's 2+, which makes these two the cost efficient tanks in terms of between tank comparison, not between infantry, because infantry is always cheaper, but they are also pretty tanky, and you're paying the points, obviously. As you can see, the turret weapon does not suffer the penalty for moving and shooting. I mean, that's a good thing, yes, but mostly only affects the tanks that have the big cannons, like the Vanquisher Battle Cannon, the Demolisher Cannon. Because the sidearms are actually quite effective this edition, and they don't want to move. That this means this is not the same as Power of the Machine Spirit. This is worse, and since you have a lot of secondary weapons, actually much worse. But whatever, he obviously can explode. He has smoke launchers, which can be nice, but a Leman Russ not shooting is obviously most of the time a problem unless he's falling back. In that case, the smoke launcher is your best option 100% because you can't do anything else. You have emergency plasma vents, so if you supercharge plasma cannons, the plasma cannon shuts down and you suffer 6 mortal wounds, so you can overheat twice and then you're gone. But remember, dealing that much damage to a tanky model is actually pretty huge. And I don't really think overheating with the plasma cannon is much of an option. You probably have to go with the normal shots most of the time. If you even take the plasma cannon, because I wouldn't. And then the last thing that the tank commander has, the other Leman Russ do not. You can issue orders to a friendly Leman Russ at the start of your shooting phase, and he has to be within 6 inches, and then you can be given 1 order per turn. First one is moving twice, and you can advance. So this is to get a lot of distance, pretty much. Can be nice to get away from somebody and pop smoke, but other than that, it's only a last resort, let's say. Reroll hits of 1 is the next one. Obviously, I already told you, great stuff. And the thing is, the thing goes higher and better the more shots you get. So Punisher and Heavy Bolter obviously profit way more from this than the single shot versions or the heavy D6 versions and so on. And I feel that's the way to go with them. Strike and Shroud is you can launch your smoke launchers and still shoot as if you didn't do anything else. That's obviously great. If you're against a very shooty army, this is definitely an option to save your Leman Russ. Maybe he's on the ink to getting downgraded to 1 ballistic skill, which is at 6 wounds. And you might be able to save some more firepower for the next turn. It's basically an investment over Gunner's Kill on sight. Or you do this, obviously, when you have the option to reroll 1s anyway. Other than this, he's a character, but he can still be targeted because he's 12 wounds. And he cannot issue orders to characters, so not to himself, only to other Leman Russes, and only 1 per turn. Now, if we look for loadout, I think the best loadout is obviously the Punisher Gatling Cannon, because it has 20 shots, strength 5. Strength 5 is extremely good this edition, because you get to wound everything pretty much all the time. The Punisher Gatling Cannon has 20 shots, which is best for rerolling 1s. And it might not have any EP, but I think the rate of fire is most of the time better than the EP anyway, especially against in-one safe heavy armies. Now for the side sponsons, I would just go with heavy bolters. Heavy bolters are cheap, they are efficient, you can have a lot of them. As long as you stand still, you get your 20 shots and then you get your 9 shots on top of it. You can even mount a storm bolter if you like. They are cheap as hell, and maybe they make the difference. You never know. And these tank commanders and so on, they are extremely efficient because they're hidden so well, and that's usually the one downside that the guard has, so they don't hit anything. Does it have any side effects? Yes, if you get charged, it's horrible. It only has leadership 7, so it can be affected by a bunch of psychic shenanigans. And it is very, very expensive. Like in terms of damage output, way too expensive, I think. But I mean, you're paying for a mobile, halfway mobile platform, so I guess that makes sense. Next thing is the Master of Ordnance, and I like this guy. Pretty much he can do 2 things. One is Artillery Barrage, which is a one-shot weapon, 100 range, heavy d6, strength 8, AP minus 2, d3 damage. So a lot of randomness. The good thing is he's ballistic skill 3, so keep that in mind when I say this. You can use this if you don't move, and you can target units that are not visible, but you subtract 1, so you better don't do that. And you can only use 1 artillery barrage per turn, regardless of how many officers you have. So the Master of Ordnance is a one-guy trick, pretty much. You put him somewhere, and then you look down on something, call your artillery in, and then you're done. That's your job. He's a character, so you can hide him pretty easily. He is very small. He's 1 unit, easy peasy. And then his ability is Master of Ballistics. You can re-roll any hit rolls of 1 made for friendly regiment, basilisk, wyverns, manticores, or death strikes, and they target enemy units over 36 inches away in the shooting phase. If they were within 3 inches of this model. That's pretty good. Rerolling once for units that cannot accept orders is always handy. 3 inches is not a very far distance though, so you have to blob around him really, really hard in order to do this. But I mean, he's gonna call down this artillery strike, and after that he doesn't require any line of sight or something like that, so he can hide behind your tanks, and that's it. Alright, then the platoon commander. The platoon commander is essentially 10 points less than the company commander, but he only can issue 1 order. Other than this, he's basically the same. He has 1 wound less. He does have a refractive field as before. So everything here applies to him as well. But if you want to run guys with plasma pistols, take the platoon commanders because they are cheaper. It's the thing where you could take him as a one-man army and he can still buff other guys around him. Other than this, I would prefer the company commander, but keep in mind the platoon commander is an elite. So if you're filling your HQ stores with, say, Tempestus guys, and you still want to have some orders on your goons on the ground, then you can take the platoon commander, something nobody else can do. Ordering with elite slots. That's actually really powerful, and keep that in mind if you make your army, because sometimes I even forget it. I should have had one in the last game. Command squad. Command squads already got fixed. For each officer you can have 1 command squad, and it has to be from the same regiment. So you can spam these guys, which was a great idea because essentially they are veterans with a bunch of special weapons. 4 guys. You can take a medipack, but I would not recommend taking one. Why? Because a medipack would only be nice to revive special weapons. You can't revive bowguns and the like, because if you read very carefully, unless something that very, very, very many Imperial Guard players apparently cannot do, but if you read it carefully, it says you can have guys restored, but only if you have 1 wound, not 3 wounds. Ogres have 3 wounds, you cannot get them. But it would be nice to get a special weapon back, or something like that. But then again, this edition, it's pretty hard to kill a special weapon, and if the special weapon dies, he's most likely the last guy in the unit. Or they'd run away, which is more likely. So, I don't like it, to be honest. I don't like the med pack. I would just take them for what they are. You have these guys. They can take a heavy flamer if they want to, okay, but most of the time they can just take Astra Militarum special weapons, which is a bunch of stuff. So special weapons would be sniper rifles, flamers, grenade launcher, melter gun, plasma guns. Sniper rifles can be nice. It's essentially you're trying to be a wannabe scout, but they are relatively inexpensive, and you can put them far in the back. You don't have to be too far forward. And in terms of damage output, they don't do less, they don't do more. They are actually pretty nice. With flamers, you can grab them and put them in chimeras, and then charge them forward with the move, and then flame something to death. And they have a surprising amount of range on flamers, and they can take a heavy flame as well. Win-win situation. If you want to play charge guard, there you go. That's your Suicide Squad. Same goes for melter guns and plasma guns. Plasma guns, you hide and you wait, and something pops out, you just shoot it to death. You're cheaper than your Tempestus, but you're less mobile, so you're always paying for the Chimera extra. And so keep that in mind when you're thinking about melter guns and all the like. It gets really, really expensive to run these guys, but they do the job perfectly. They are exactly designed to do this. You don't pay anything more if you don't like. And as I said, if you want to just take one and not do any of the like and not pay for a Chimera, give them heavy weapon, one heavy weapon, and two sniper rifles or something, and then they can do something else. I don't know, maybe it might be a workout. You have the ability to shoot at different targets this edition, so this actually is a viable option if you want to. Last but not least, you can take a regimental standard. You add one to your leadership, but screw that. That's why you have Commissars, pretty much. Alright, the infantry squad. Infantry squads are actually weird now, because you can't take gigantic amounts of them anymore. An infantry squad is 10 guys, and that's it. You still can take your Voxcaster, you can still take a heavy weapon team, you can still take a special weapon, but you can only take one of each kind, pretty much. So it makes this unit a very awkward and weird version of wannabe conscripts, so to say. Obviously you have the sergeant, he has some specialized weaponry, but it's not really that much. And you're not all that tanky, your leadership is pretty crappy. I rarely run infantry squads these days. I don't think they are worth it. They need to come in bigger groups to make orders more efficient and buffs more efficient on them to actually use them. The best use would probably be as sort of a blocking unit, let's say. You're trying to move these a little bit further away from your gun line and try to block stuff away, because they do this better and cheaper than other options, except conscripts. That's why I don't use them there anyway, because I can just use conscripts. They're always better, because they're cheaper. The special weapons squad is the exact same as the HQ squad, except these guys here can also take demo charges, and it's only 3 models per unit. So you're buying 3 guardsmen and 3 special weapon guys. I mean, yes, the only issue is that their entire thing is shooting, and they don't shoot very well. Ballistic skill 4 is pretty meh. And you can try to run them in chimeras, but they always occupy 6 slots. So it makes this less efficient than command squads, for example, which is why they got nerfed and the special weapons squad is still the same. So these guys are viable, but I probably wouldn't run them too much. Heavy weapon squads. Now these guys are great. Now you don't hear me talking about heavy weapons in the infantry squads and so on. Why? Because you're paying for guardsmen, and then you're paying for a extra weapon, and then you have your team. A heavy weapon squad team is actually cheap. They're really, really cheap. They have one heavy weapon team, which is one model, which is what you pay the price for, not 2 guardsman models with a heavy weapon. That's more expensive. I don't know why they made this like this, but heavy weapon squad are more cost efficient than any other version. And obviously heavy weapon squads are great this edition because you can have a lot of heavy support slots, which is something you were lacking before. And you can only take 3 in a squad, but if you have enough of them, their firepower is actually pretty nice. Now back to the heavy weapon part. I think this edition had a heavy bolter is actually really good because it has a great profile. It has -1 AP, which is just enough to trigger invuln saves and not enough to do anything else. Maybe ignore cover. It's not a bad option. It's cheap. 9 points is nothing, and it gets the job done the cheapest, I think. Mortar is in every way weaker, less reliable. The only option you have for not requiring line of sight, but most of the time that's not an issue for a heavy weapon squad, since 36 range means they will be somewhere high up and still be in range. There's rocket launchers and there's all these shenanigans, but remember, if the enemy has high range shooting or any deep striking, which is almost anybody, they can take out these guys really easy, and you get only 1 shot per rocket launcher. 3 shots for a heavy bolter, it sounds better to me, just because your ballistic skill is not that good. So you need to have enough firepower to draw on the enemy in dice, and that's what the heavy weapon squad can do. They are cheap, they're expendable. If the enemy focuses on them, he doesn't focus on something else. You can bait a lot of firepower to them, put them in ruins, and there you go. Got the 3-up save that you always wanted. The 4-up save. 3-up save is for losers. But, you know, 4-up is close enough, and they should be doing their job. The only issue is, if they fail morale, you will always use an entire heavy weapon squad, but let's be honest, if they're getting shot at and they lose 2 models, they're most likely half dead anyway. Alright, veterans is the exact same as the guardsmen. 10 guys, can't get more, can't get less. You have more options though. You have the veteran team, weapon team, which is meh. You can take 3 special weapon yet again, which is one less than the command squad, which is why I got nerfed. And now these guys, and I don't know, they are a weird mixture. They can be pretty nice. You can put them in chimeras and so on, but they occupy a huge amount of slots because they're 10. They are not cheap enough to put them in the front line, which is why I wouldn't run them as well. And I don't really see their purpose. That's the only problem. They might be okay as a second rank of firing guys, but other than this, their most effective use probably is gonna be having a bunch of orders around, being able to order first rank, second rank fire, and put them behind conscripts or something. I don't know. I just think the only reason what they do better than others is protecting the special weapons, because you're paying special weapons and then you have some ablative wounds that you can throw in front. But in that case, just bring more special weapons, in my opinion. They got so cheap. A special weapon is 7 points for plasma. That's incredible. The only thing where I would say that might pay off is the melter gun, because the melter gun is pretty expensive in terms of how much you're paying and how badly you want to take this guy to the front and need to make sure that he survives until he's in range, because then he might be able to one-shot a character, which is obviously a good treat, and these guys have pretty good ballistic skills, so it's a good chance that they actually might do the job as anybody else would that is called a veteran or a command squad. Conscripts. Conscripts, you hear me talking of conscripts all the time. Why is that? Conscripts are great. They are cheap as hell. They are the cheapest unit you will ever have. You have 20 of them for 3 points, means you pay the 60 something. You can have 50 conscripts for 150 points. Sounds good. 50 bomb bodies for 150 points. Why are they so cheap? That's the question here, because obviously there would be no reason to run these guys if there weren't some drawbacks. So first drawback is obvious. Weapon skill, ballistic skill 5. So they don't hit anything. They might have gigatons of shots, but they don't hit very well. Now this is where the orders kick in. Let's just take another boatload of cheap shots and see if we hit something now, because if you compare this price to other guardsmen, they're actually shooting pretty well. They are actually not that bad considering everything, and if you take a Ministerial Priest, they go up to 2 attacks each, which is something you might consider if the enemy has some sort of cheapish close combat unit that is pretty squishy, aka orcs. These guys you can hurt, and every wound that it goes through will most likely not be saved. Against Space Marines and the like, you're not probably gonna do anything to them, but still. Also, conscripts lack options. They don't have anything. They can take lascans, they can take frag grenades, and that's it. You can't take any power weapons, sergeants, any shenanigans whatsoever. This blob is raw meat, nothing else. They have leadership 4, which is obviously ridiculous, which is why you have a commissar, and which is why their leadership is absolutely irrelevant most of the time. The only thing this means is they are absolutely devastated by psychic attacks. And do not think why that King's Warjack will not add more stuff that is based on leadership tests, because they can actually get wiped by psychic powers pretty easily. But then again, you're wasting psychic power on something that is 50 times more wounds than you, but it has probably the same price. So that's fine with you. So no matter what you do to conscripts, they always beat you with, but we have 10,000 more, and you don't. And that's why we win the combat, and we win the cost efficiency trades. So essentially their job is very simple. You can push them up the field. You have to protect their support. Their commander, for example, has to be protected. The commissar has to be protected. Your psychic support has to be protected. Your tanks have to be protected. Your special weapons. Conscripts do all of this. That's what they are made for. They cannot be surrounded. They can always fall back pretty much. As long as your support isn't getting vindicated assassins or something, you will be fine. And if your support gets shot down by a vindicated assassin, other troops would be screwed as well. Conscripts actually don't do that worse than the other infantry squads you have. This is basically your bread and butter, and this is what basically brings in instant victory. And I don't say this lightly. I say if the enemy focuses too much on heavy weapon and something like that to crack open the flyer spam that prevails and all that stuff, you might actually just overrun them. There's nothing they can do about it. The blob moves fast as heck with 12 inches plus 2d6 each turn with a reroll if you'd like with your command point, and one is happening in the movement, one is in the shooting. So if you want to, you can push up really quickly, and obviously you have to take care of your command guys so they don't just die before you get in range, but still, that's something conscripts can do. I believe they are truly the best in the battle role, and they are troops, so you can have as many as you want. The only thing is, how much should you take? That's the thing. I'm usually running 150, something like that, because more of them you can't get across the board reliably, because it's just not enough space. You're better off with dropping some sort of heavy weaponry and the enemy's back that actually gets the killing done. But these guys will sit on the objectives, they will take tactical objectives, they will take relics, they can do everything you have to do that a guard usually cannot do. A gunline cannot move very far. A gunline doesn't want to move very far. Conscripts don't care. They can run as much as they want. They won't lose much. And they can deal with pretty much anything. They can even charge a Land Raider. Who cares? The Land Raider can't shoot for that turn, and that's it for the Land Raider for all game, pretty much. Rough Riders. Rough Riders got better because they now have 2 wounds, unless they got slower, which is what they got. They are now moving 10 inches and not 12 as before. But other than that, they're actually pretty much the same. They have strength 3 attacks, and their little purebred steeds can also attack with their hooves. But the hooves are strength user, which is 3 still. And it's only one additional attack. So they're not that efficient. They are not very expensive though, so you can run them just because they are inexpensive, which is always a good reason to get something. And then there's the trick, they have a hunting lance, which means you can get +2 to your strength, brings you up to strength 5, AP -2, D3 damage each, and you can take one attack with this if you charge. The sergeant obviously has 2, but you know, you don't get more attacks. The trick is, this is relatively hard to land because it's a 50-50, but it's a lot of damage. If you can get charges off reliably with these guys, they're pretty nice, and they're better played as some sort of vulture unit, where you're coming in with your spears when the enemy is always whittled down, so you have the ability to charge again. Because if you lose a charge bonus, you're essentially 2 wounds guardsmen in a close combat, and you don't want close combat with guardsmen, no matter what. And that's pretty much it about Rough Riders. I don't run them very often because I think I need the points for something else, but it doesn't mean they're bad. They're much better than before. I think they're in a decent spot, so to say. Alright, sentinels. Sentinels are actually pretty simple to explain, but I'll take the time because I know a bunch of stuff about sentinels that others might not. The sentinel per se is a weird unit because the there we go. Sentinels do not have any support. What I mean by that is, unless you have something that affects all Astra Militarum units, which is not that much in the Codex, they can't get any command benefits because there is no command sentinel, and they can't get any tank orders because they're obviously not a Leman Russ tank. At the same time, you're paying points for something that is still extremely fragile, like their wounds and their toughness doesn't pay off as hard as for other vehicles, and they still take the same price problem that other vehicles also might have. So you might ask yourself, well, why would I take Sentinels then? Sentinels used to be something like a what's a nice way to say it? Essentially, you were trying to attack something like an orc group because they had armor 10 and they couldn't hurt you with strength 3. So as long as the mob of top power claw is not around or misses, which can happen, you're locking them up in close combat. You can go for line breaker, you can go all kinds of weird stuff. But the Sentinel even then never had a role. Even with the formation with the Sentinels, I tried to make the Sentinels work. It didn't. No matter if armored or not, I don't think Sentinels are worth taking at any point unless you like the models, and that's the reason you take them. But in terms of gameplay, I don't think they add anything to the army that you can't do better with other guys. If you want firepower and so on, take your veteran stuff, take your other guys. If you want to lock up something, take the conscripts. You can just take hundreds of them for the same point cost and for probably more damage on average than a Sentinel will ever do. The difference between both of them is just the survivability. The armored Sentinel is a little bit more survivable, and it's only a tad more expensive. So if you want to run Sentinels so badly that you don't care if they shit or not, then you could take the armored Sentinel better. Also, the armored Sentinel has access to plasma guns, plasma cannons, which are obviously pretty nice. But remember, if you overheat, your Sentinel goes bye-bye, because it does not have overheating specialized stuff in a tank or something. No, it doesn't have any vents whatsoever to deal with the plasma damage. So You could use it as a bait unit where the enemy has to consider, do I take out that annoying plasma cannon shots, but I will have to invest a little bit into it. Is the heavy firepower somewhere else needed? So if you want to run it, please have something that has a appropriate profile next to it, so the enemy actually has to decide whether or not the Sentinel needs to die or not. Because it might bait him into shooting the Sentinel, which is probably not even worth it. Because remember, the Sentinel only has a basic skill of 4, so everything, all the damage profiles you read on your weapons are essentially halved, and you pay the full price for all weapons. So, not sure how worth taking the Sentinel is today, but in my opinion, it did not really change. I got this, my headset is going off for some reason. Whatever, it's still, I would say, a very versatile unit, but I can't really see where I would need a Sentinel and not something else. Like, where is its purpose? I'm always looking for that purpose. And to be honest, I don't think there is any. I think the Sentinel is just included because the Sentinel is actually a pretty nice looking model. It's Star Wars related, and obviously there have to be rules for models that exist, otherwise people will get very, very mad. And that's pretty much how the Sentinel works right now. Alright, give me a second. My headset is constantly disconnecting. There we go. All right. Chimera. The Chimera is a very interesting concept and always was. It was never fully bad, but it was never fully great. But it's something that didn't get too expensive in terms of the vehicle overhaul, and I think that's something that benefits the Chimera more than it does on others. Now, what does it mean? The Chimera used to be able to transport only 1 unit, and now it can transport up to 2. And even better, the Chimera can transport 12, which is really important because we will look at the Taurox later and see what can the Chimera actually do that the Taurox can't. That is, you can fit 3 command squads in here. You can fit 2 special weapon squads in here. So you can get all these special guys and put them in there, and the Chimera is now certainly more survivable than it was before. So that's great. Chimeras are something that are really, really nice if you want to get stuff forward. Stuff forward is obviously not really the guard style, but it's good enough, I think. The equipment is always the same. You usually run the heavy bolter setup because it's the cheapest, and the heavy bolter performs better than the multi-laser because the multi-laser lacks the -1 AP, and strength 6 isn't as good as it used to be because the strength 6 doesn't really do much against vehicles unless they're very, very light vehicles like Chimeras, for example, and it doesn't hurt infantry with toughness 4 better than before. So I'd say take the heavy bolter. And all other options are pretty much a no-go because the Chimera is survivable enough, but if you make it even more of a target, then the guys inside will actually not profit from the fact that they're hidden inside of a metal box that your opponent doesn't want to waste shots on. The heavy bolters the Chimera has are okay, but not very useful, because obviously it will rarely stand still, and if it has to stand still, then you have 2 heavy bolters for a very expensive price. So it's meh. The last gun arrays are pretty much 3 guardsmen, and you can fire both of these. The cool thing about this is line of sight and all that stuff doesn't matter anymore. Your last gun arrays can shoot from the very top of your turret or from your back wheel. Doesn't matter. They can shoot from anywhere, which means you have 6 guardsmen, because you have 2 of them, with rapid fire, sometimes shooting around without orders, but nevertheless, it's a little bit of firepower. I think it's pretty nice. The Chimera itself is like 75 points for the vehicle, and then whatever you take on it. You might get away with a Stormbolter if you want to, because it's very inexpensive and it has a very good profile, and it's actually one of the weapons that can get into rapid fire range if it's mounted on a transport. Heavy Flamer, all that stuff. I wouldn't necessarily run this on a Chimera. That's the difference. Its main purpose, in my opinion, is still just getting the troops up there, and that's it. It has a smoke launcher, so you can push forward really far and then smoke launch. But other than this, it's not really yeah, how do I say this? It's not a vehicle. It's meant to be killing stuff. I don't think that's a very good strategy, but it is decent enough in what it does. Especially if you compare it to the Taurox, because the Taurox is only capable of getting 10 guys. Now, let's say 10 guys, okay. It also has 2 autocannons, which is super weird. And it cannot swap these autocannons for anything else. Now, you might say, well, autocannon's not bad. I mean, it's 4 shots with strength 7, AP -1, 2 damage, so it's pretty nice against vehicles and the like. The thing is, it still doesn't hit very well. And it is meant to transport guys to the front, and it's very fast. It's moving 14. So on the one hand, you want to stand and shoot your autocannons, and on the other hand, you bought this thing for the movement and for the transport capacity. So it's a weird hybrid of being able to shoot pretty well, being not as expensive as the Chimera, but not having the same capacity as others. A Taurox can come in handy if you want to transport officers, because obviously in a Chimera that is usually filled, unless you're filling it with veterans, and then 2 guys can get in. But the Taurox can fill 2 times 4 guys, for example, or 1 6-man squad, and then you can add a commander, you can add a commissar, and they are protected in there. If they get out of the vehicle before it explodes, they're pretty safe. So that could be a thing that you can do with the Taurox. Now, in considering survivability, the Taurox and the Chimera actually have the same survival status, except the Chimera's toughness 7. That's a pretty big deal, considering plasma weaponry can ruin your day, and you don't even have to overheat to kill the Taurox. However, the Taurox is a little bit faster, so if you want to go further, then the Taurox is probably even then the better idea, because you get that additional 2 inches each time it drives. Note, however, it does not have smoke launchers, so that makes this a little bit less survivable. But it is a decent idea to use it as a defense platform if you want to, and make sure the autocannon goes to work, and whatever you want protected as officers, you can keep that. Alright. Hellhounds. Hellhounds are weird, because on the one hand they are great, and on the other hand they are terrible, which is pretty easy to explain. So first of all, Hellhound has 11 hull points and its toughness 7, so it's a little bit more survivable than a Chimera, but almost the same. It is way more expensive though, so we're starting at 100 and plus points at least. Otherwise, we don't have any weaponry, which obviously is impossible to do. The Hellhounds can take multiples in the same slot, so they're not limited by slots by any means, which doesn't do much because they're still not a very good unit. That's the problem. But still, you have a squad, so you can take them in one slot and then split them up in the game, which is nice because it's better than blowing them all up on the same target. Now, every model has a heavy bolter at the front and a heavy flamer or multi-melter as option. Now, a heavy flamer makes sense because this thing drives forward and tries to attack stuff. A multi-melter, not so much, because its ballistic skill is still 4. So it means everything that auto hits is pretty much better, or anything that gets more shots is also better. Now, the basic Hellhound has an Inferno cannon. It's 16 range, which is actually a very, very huge range for a flamer. Has heavy D6, so has 3 hits on average. Strength 6, AP -1, 2 damage. Now this is really, really weird, because this profile is pretty good range, pretty decent strength, okay AP, and good damage. But what kind of unit do you want to attack with this that needs this profile? If you're attacking heavy infantry, you don't need the strength 6 most of the time. You also don't need the 2 damage unless you're fighting Terminators and cavalry and whatnot. And coming close to these guys, even with a Hellhound, is certainly a bad idea, especially if it's cavalry. If you're fighting cavalry, they will be within 4 inches the next thing you do. So, it's weird. Like, the profile isn't bad, but it's not very good. It's not good against vehicles because it's only strength 6 and AP -1, which is not much. 2 damage is pretty good, but you have to get those through, and that's 3 shots per turn. I would say that's just better options. Then the melter cannon is essentially a D3 multi-melter. Now the problem is you're moving around with a heavy weapon. Don't forget this. You are moving around because you're moving 12 inches per turn, and if you stand still, you're probably not going to be in range of anything. So heavy D3 means on average 2 shots, and we hit none because we're hitting on 5s as soon as we move. This problem is not with the Inferno cannon and not with the Champ cannon, because they automatically hit. In that case, it doesn't matter, whatever. Who cares? So I don't think the melter cannon is a very good option just for that problem. You're still as immobile as before. You're still paying a lot of points for the melter cannon. It's And then the Champ cannon. Basically, the Bane Wolf was always kind of a weird thing. It wasn't never really bad, but the Bane Wolf is really something that can bring the pain. It's not very known for it, but it is very, very good, and it always had the same profile as it has right now. First of all, range 8, so it's pretty close range in terms of what flamers do. But keep in mind, this is the same range a heavy flamer nowadays has too, and it can move 12 and still fire. So that's 20 effective range. Heavy D6 as usual. Strength dash, but it wounds everything on a 2+ unless it's targeting a vehicle, in which case it wounds on a 6+. Now that is something to talk about, because wounding on 2s is actually pretty hefty. If you're looking at strength 6, you might be able to wound something on 3s most of the time, but on 2s you only do it with toughness 3. This other thing is the AP value. The AP value is -3, and that's something to talk about too, because that is pretty much plasma gun profile, or power sword in this case. So it is Rex infantry as soon as they get decent armor. So against Orc Bikers, against Space Marines, Terminators, whatnot. You don't need more AP because that will trigger most invuln saves, and you don't need less AP because there's always these 4+ armored dudes, and they wouldn't get any saves with this. So this thing is actually pretty dangerous against anything that has high high points units walking around that have to come to you, because your range doesn't matter if you're using this as a defensive tool. This goes for all Hellhound types, for Bane Wolf, Devil Dog, and Hellhound. The closer the enemy gets, the better you work, because you don't have to drive, you don't have to move your heavy weapon, and they will get in range of your secondary weapon as well. And essentially, the problem is, this is a situation. Situational units are most of the time not as good as others, and these things on top of this are very expensive because they are vehicles and you pay for the armor. You basically pay for a Chimera without transport capacity with increased damage. So instead of taking the gem cannon, I would just run up with plasma guns and do the same job, probably cheaper at same range, or actually closer range if necessary, but 12 max range on rapid fire, which is 4 inches more. So it's weird. I don't dislike them, but I don't think they're worth taking either. Weird mixed unit. The faster tech slots in general in Astra Militarum are weird. Alright, and then comes a bunch of units. This is all the artillery section. Basilisk, just the first one to speak of. But keep in mind something here. Guns players used to run these, and they had amazing profiles for all intents and purposes, except the AP wasn't as good, and they didn't ignore cover, which is something they truly fixed. The formation that they had in the 7th edition, which is where they went actually pretty nice. But the Basilisk has a complete profile change, and people don't really get what happened, I think. Now, the reason why Basilisk and Wyverns and Manticores were actually decent in a guard army is because they circumvent the problem that your ballistic skill is just bad, straight up bad. 50% of everything you get is bad. But if you take a big template, and even if you scatter a little bit off, you might still hit something. This changed. Now we don't have any templates anymore. And the Basilisk and the Wyverns are not the infantry shredder units they are, which they were before, because there is this D6 problem at the start of the weapon that determines how effective is it going to be. And for the Basilisk, this means he is absolutely trash against any infantry targets that are not like super heavy infantry, because his quantity is severely dropped against these targets, but his quantity against vehicles and single targets and monstrous creatures has been increased, because you could only hit them once, and now you can hit them multiple times, even though they are only one target. And you have a very hefty profile to deal with those guys. So this is where it comes in, where the guard player is having, like, I don't know, 4 Basilisk or something like that, and you're wondering, what the heck is he gonna shoot with that? Because there has to be a lot of monsters coming for you if you want to have 4 Basilisks and want to invest so many points into them and the defense around them to get them rolling. So these are pretty specialized units. They're not an all-round kick-ass unit as they were before. The Earthshaker cannon still has immense range. Heavy D6 is obviously a big problem, because you might roll a 1 and you're not getting your points back with one shot. And you're hitting on 4s now, which sucks. AP -2 is okay, it's better than AP 4 because it still does something no matter what. And D3 damage is meh, pretty meh. A dedicated anti-tank thing usually should have D6 damage. But still. The good thing about the Earthshaker cannon is you roll 2 numbers for dice for the numbers of attacks, and you discard the lowest. And that sounds pretty nice, but on average you're getting more shots out, but your crappy ballistic skill always halves the more shots you get. That's the big problem with this kind of mathematics, where you want to try to make them better, but realistically they don't get any orders, and only the Master of Ordnance can help them with the rerolling ones. Other than that, I don't think there's anything in the codex that makes this better. Obviously there are also squadrons, so you can fill your heavy support slots, but basilisks are very expensive, so I wouldn't necessarily spam them if I was you, because as I said, they have a very specialized version of blast profile. Hydras. Now Hydras are weird. Hydras are much better than before, and I think might be something maybe hidden OP. A Hydra has a Hydra quad autocannon and a heavy bolter. A Hydra quad autocannon is not heavy D6 or something like that, it's heavy 8, and its range is 72 inches. So we're talking about a lot of range and 4 shots on average hitting, which is actually way more than the Basilisk on average has. Strength 7, AP -1, 2 damage, so it's an autocannon still. It's just an autocannon with 4 bound together, basically. And now comes the big part that makes this unit either broken or pretty meh. You add 1 to all hit rolls for this weapon against targets that can fly, aka jump marines and spikes and flyers and whatnot, everything that's fast. Also subtract 1 from all hit rolls for this weapon against all other targets. So essentially you have a ballistic skill 3 4 shots autocannon on a vehicle that doesn't die very easily on a huge range, like way more range than a autocannon will ever have. Obviously still unsupported most of the time, but we're talking about a lot of firepower here. Now, if you were to know that the meta consists of a bunch of flying units, or is very fast moving, which consists of flying units always then, or if you know you're playing against something like Eldar, for example, who will always have transports that fly, this thing actually has murderous damage output. The strength 7 is not overkill at all, because you will most likely target vehicles with this, and fast moving flying units most of the time have 2 wounds, and most of the time even can fly, so for jet bikes and all that stuff. So this profile can actually deal with these pretty nicely, and the heavy 8 actually makes this 100% reliable. It's very, very seldom that you will miss more than average with these than with any demolisher cannon or whatever you have that can shoot otherwise. I think the Hydra is something worth considering depending on the meta, and it might be very, very good, and in other cases not so good because it doesn't hit very well. That's the -1 penalty right there. Wyverns. Wyverns got nerfed by the Blast Tempestus Scions as well. Their ballistic skill is still 4, which didn't matter at all because they had the barrage rule. They could fire and fire and fire, and no issue. You would always hit something with the amount of templates you get. You still get a bunch of shots. There's still strength 4. They don't ignore cover anymore, but you still reroll the wounds. So essentially it's still effective against light infantry, but against heavy infantry it's not as reliable anymore, because 3d6 sounds like a lot, but they only have 1 Wyvern quad Storm Shard bolter, which is just this. So we have heavy 4d6 total, which is, let's say, we go on average, so we have 3 hits per every d4, so we have 12 shots that we're talking about. And I mean, 12 shots means 6 hitting and then let's say 5 wounding of that against something like let's say Space Marines or something. It doesn't have any AP though, so it can deal wounds pretty nicely, but it's not as effective as before because it gets hurt by the ballistic skill modifier much more than it used to. Other than this, the Wyvern is still okay because it's pretty inexpensive in terms of how many points it costs in comparison to others, but it got nerfed severely for sure, I think. Manticore. Now Manticore is obviously always something that's compared to a Basilisk, and for good reason. Their profiles are actually very, very similar. Huge range, this time heavy 2d6. The Basilisk, remember, has 2d6 picked the highest. Strength 10, so 1 strength higher. AP -2, damage d3. So again, high damage values not present. D3 is okay, but not high. humongous range. Strength 10 is actually pretty big. But against what do you need strength 10 actually? What can strength 9 not deal with? Probably some Nurgle creature will have toughness 9 as always when Forge World brings out their index books. I'm pretty sure there will be something in there, but it's, let's say, apart from these very weird things, strength 9 would be proficient. So strength 10 wounds, tougher stuff, everything that's toughness 5 on 2s, which is nice. In this case, the Manticore would actually be best used against monsters and heavy infantry that is very tough and requires a lot of power to bring down with normal last gunshots. There is not much in the game that fits his profile, but I think the Manticore is very expensive for what it does. 2d6 is pretty nice. So we have 6 shots, we're averaging on 3 hits, which, let's say, everything wounds, and then we have only minus 2 AP. So unless the target has a very, very low armor save, most likely you won't get everything through. So we're talking about maybe 3 wounds on average, let's say. I'm not sure if the Manticore is worth the points there. I think there's other weaponry that does more damage on average and can be buffed better than the Manticore will. This is actually sad because I really like it, but I don't think it's very good at the moment in this sense. It doesn't have a real purpose to me where I want it. Death Strike. Death Strike seems to be okay, but it still has the same problem as before. You can only fire it once, and you can only do it if you roll a certain die, because you can never fire unless the hour is nigh, and you cannot shoot unless you get that d6 plus better round number and get your 8. Is it? Yeah, 8. So takes a lot of time until the Death Strike fires, and the best time when a Death Strike is fired is when something clumps up, because this is one of the second thing that I know that has AoE damage in the Codex. Well, the other one is a Psyker. So the Death Strike is pretty I don't know, it can work maybe, but it's immensely expensive and less reliable than the Manticore is. So at that point you probably want to take the Manticore. The only good thing about it is you deal water wounds, which is obviously worth a ton, and you don't have anything else that can deal mortal wounds in such range. So that's actually pretty powerful in that regard. Leman Russ, I already talked a lot about them. Everything applies here except their ballistic skill is even worse than the tank commanders. So in this case, I'm only taking Leman Russ battle tanks if I can't fit any tank commanders or Pask in there, and I have one tank commander that still has to do orders to something, then I would add another Leman Russ to get that order and reroll once. Other than this, same analysis. I would take the heavy decker over the single shots because they're not very reliable shooters with these cannons. It's just the way it is, and the most of you can get out of them is probably the second version, the Demolisher version, which can run the Punisher Gatling cannon. All other options are pretty meh. Executioner plasma cannons are pretty good, but very expensive and very dangerous for yourself if you want to go to strength 8, and they might not cut it against anything else. But then again, if you want high AP, I think the Executioner is still a good option. The Demolisher is pretty overkill most of the time. Short range, very easy to bind in close combat, and only has D3 shots. So that's not a lot. That's actually very, very, very few. But okay, I guess. And to 5 shots, I mean, heavy D6, heavy D3 is 2 shots to 3 shots, and they still get only 3 shots out of a very expensive tank. I don't know. I don't like it. Baneblades, we don't have to talk much about these. Essentially, what the Baneblade offers is a boatload of heavy bolter shots, always. Some decent melee power, actually, because it's weapon skill 5 and -2 AP, D3. Not bad. Fairly fast, not as fast as you used to, but it has a bunch of wounds. 26 gets you almost anywhere. And in terms of points cost, they're not actually that expensive compared to Leman Russ and so on. And the Baneblade cannon and other cannons that we have on the other Baneblade variants here are all very high strength and can deal devastating damage against stuff that has high toughness values or high armor. As you can see, strength is high, AP is high, damage is always D6 or something better. That's something that the other vehicles can't do for Astra Militarum, for example. There's only one exception to this that I want to talk about, which is the Stormlord. The Stormlord is still as before. It doesn't have very good shooting, only has the Vulcan Mega Bolter, which is 20 shots, strength 6, AP -2 damage, which is by no means bad. I'm not talking about bad. It's like a version of a autocannon, basically. But it has a firing deck, which is really awesome. So it's a gigantic transport, pretty much. You can get a bunch of guys in there and just shoot out of it as if it was a giant battle wagon. And it will appreciate that you stand still because it doesn't have anything saying, yes, we can't. I mean, you can fall back and shoot and so on. You can still fire your weapons within one, yada, 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 but you cannot move and shoot with full ballistic skill. So Stormlord can be like your mobile thing, or you can just be a standing platform for shooting units. You can put them all in there. They can't get orders, but some units like heavy weapon teams don't get orders very often anyway, because there's too many of them. So you can put them in here. This is an interesting choice in the Baneblade version. The rest is just, as you can see, high range, high damage, more damage, high AP, just some little variations here and there, but essentially the same thing over and over. I will go through these pretty quickly because they're not that interesting. Creed is just a better commander. If you take him, you take 2 command points if Lord Creed is your warlord. Why not? 3 commands, and this, and he has a hotshot, last bliss, and power sword, and he's not that expensive. If you want to run Cadian, you take him, for sure. This guy here, okay, because you can reroll failed morale tests, and you get 1 more order out of an officer, but I wouldn't consider him like really good auto-include. Creed is an auto-include. Pask, exact same. Also Cadian, great mixture. +1 ballistic skill over any other tank commander, and he can order himself and other tank commanders because he can order characters. Awesome. That's something the others can't do. So this guy is the buff for himself and for another Leman Russ command. That's really good. I really like that guy. Some weird stuff here. Iron Hand Strengthen, bad. I don't like it at all because essentially you get more attacks in close combat. You don't want to be in close combat. That's it. His rule is pretty meh, and this stuff here is okay because he's a senior officer, but at that point he's more expensive. And then comes this guy. The sergeant is actually the real hero here, because if you make your guys Catachans, which you can make any because it's a regiment keyword, you can reroll hit rolls of 1 and shooting phase for friendly Catachan units within 6 inches. How awesome is that? Everybody gets the first order just for free. So grab your last guns, grab your first rank, second rank fire. Everybody rerolls once. Awesome. And he's cheap as hell. And he has a heavy bolter with a -2 AP, and he's a character so you can't kill him as easily. Why not? Take him. That's, I don't know, everything about him is good. If you want to run no Cadians and you have some Catachans, why not? Now comes the weird part, the Commissar. I was talking about Commissar when we're dealing with leadership. Why's that? First of all of them can use his leadership, which is 9 or 8 for Commissars, within 6 inches instead of their own. That's good. And even if that doesn't work, if you're losing like 50 conscripts, which you might, you can just kill one guy and that's it. Basically, you shoot one and that's all you lose from your leadership problems. Awesome. Their characters, they have 4/3 wounds each. You can hide them somewhere in your big blobs. You might take 2 of them. You might give them a plasma pistol. They have good ballistic skill. Good unit all around. Put them inside of your army. Hide them behind a camera so they can't be seen and the snipers are all set. And just get them next to the blob. You might give them a transport if you want to, just so they can push up faster. And Commissar Yarrick, the hero of all. He is a normal commissar, just more expensive, but you can reroll once for friendly Astra Militarum units within 6 inches. Okay, so he has Astra Militarum units, not infantry, not regiment, everybody. Yes, everybody can do this. So this guy can be included anywhere, and you can put him in the midst of a blob, and he will, first of all, he will be a beefy commissar, which is good, because you need a commissar anyway, and he has the same rules as the other commissars have as well. He has leadership 9, so he's actually a better commissar in that sense. 4+ save, pretty tanky, might not die with his ability, and re-rolls once for everything. Awesome. Get that on all of your vehicles that can't hit for anything and can't get orders. Now they can. No issue. Tempestus. Tempestus Prime is awesome because he allows us to take the Tempestus Command Squad. Imagine everything I said about the Command Squad, except these guys have 4+ armor and they can drop behind enemy lines. Why not? Awesome. Like really, really good guys. The Hotshot Lascan itself is not as good, but you can give them 4 plasma guns, 4 melta guns, whatever you like, and they will do the job. And what do you need for the orders? You need the Tempestus Prime. The Tempestus Prime will drop behind them and will give them the orders to reroll ones and do whatnot to make sure they can get the job done. And he can take for free a Tempestus Command Rod, which allows him to use his ability twice. Obviously, he can't have a Hotshot Las Pistol or Plasma Pistol if he does this, but obviously, the less guys you deep strike, the better it is, because you have to fit them in your army, and you have to make sure that you actually get the 50% starts on the board rule right. So this guy here is a very good asset for other Tempestus. The normal Militarum Tempestus Scions are better in transports, most likely, because of what I already said. The Hotshot Lascan is not in rapid fire range when they drop down, because they have to be more than 9 inches away. And the Hotshot Lascan only does something when you have enough firepower attached to it. They have pretty good ballistic skill, but the strength 3 makes the Hotshot Lascan pretty ineffective. Although it got buffed this edition because it doesn't wound everything on 6s. You can even still wound toughness 6 on 6s, but toughness 5 is on 5s now. So it's better than before, I'd say. And then again, the AP3 doesn't get completely negated by 2+ armor saves, but you can still hurt 2+ armor saves pretty badly, because you're dropping them down to a 4-up. So that's good. Good buff for them. They are rather inexpensive, very mobile, very good for objective grabbing, and they are troops. Don't forget this. You can get some Tempestus dudes in there. Just remember, Tempestus guys can only get orders from Tempestus Primes, because they have the faction Militarum Tempestus, and they cannot take any regiment keyword. Now I was talking about transports. This is the transport they can take. So you can fit 2 groups of 5 in there with 2 special weapons in each. The Taurox Prime is essentially the same as a Taurox in terms of survivability, movement speed, and the like. But instead of having 2 autocannons, it has a Taurox battle cannon and 2 hotshot volley guns. And it has ballistic skill of 3, which is nice. So it's a veteran. vehicle, something that can actually hit something with long range if it wants to. Because it can take a missile launcher, it can take a Gatling cannon, battle cannon, 2 autocannons, whatever you can take. If you want to move it as a mobile Tempestus vehicle, I wouldn't gear up on it because it gets too expensive. But if it's just there to stand in the back and protect something, it's actually a very good shooting platform in terms of damage output. Very underrated, I think, because it can do such very reliable in comparison to other vehicles that you have in your army. But then again, it's still a valid option to just use it as a counter deployment type of thing. Where you fit 3 units on the table in just one vehicle, and then you have 2 squads and a commando guy in reserve dropping in, so you can always counterbalance the 50% rule pretty nicely with transports here. Alright, Auxilia. Remember, Auxilia get no orders. Keep this in mind. Ogrins are your wannabe close combat unit without any AP on their attacks, which is really, really because they're rather expensive. They are pretty tough with 3 wounds and toughness 5, but they have a 5+ save, so that doesn't count for much. And they have 3 attacks or 4 on the charge, but no AP. And they're only moving 6, so you have to pay additional points for the transport. And I don't know, I don't think they're very effective. Not if you look down, there's Bullgrins. Bullgrins, much more expensive, but already rocking that 4+ save. Having a brute shield or slap shield, which means 4+ invuln or 2+ armor. And now we're talking, because that is a tough unit that can take on the elite units that your enemy might have that your other guys can't, and maybe they can hold them up long enough and actually threaten them, like monstrous creatures, for example, which your other guys can't. So that's the use I see for Bullgrins, but that's pretty much all. I don't think they do much else. You can park up some of them in Stormlord, for example, and just cheese them out that way, because that thing can fit like hundreds of them. But other than this, they always have this problem that they're not that good in close combat. The Bullgrin Maul is good, but it makes them even more expensive and makes their profile still awkward, because AP -1, strength 7 is a weird profile. You can club down monsters, but against other stuff, I don't know. They're a little bit specialized, let's say this. Ratlings. Ratlings are interesting, very, very interesting. I have not played Ratlings before, because we don't have the models, but I think they're good. Maybe they were good before, but I think now they're extremely good. Why is that? Now, first of all, you would say, toughness 2, they're grots. Strength 2, toughness 2, 5 leadership. That's nothing. Like, absolutely nothing. Yes, that's true. That means they're absolutely horrible as tanks, and I see people playing them as tanks, like a conscript or something. That's horrible use of them. They are expensive in that sense that you can't just blob them up here and they will not make back their points because they don't have anything on them that makes them good as tanks. What makes them good is the fact that they have basic skill 3, and that's something that is nothing to sneeze at in the Imperium. And they can take sniper rifles. And we all know that the characters you can take nowadays are really, really good buffs for the surrounding armies. They are all buff machines now. So taking out characters can actually be very, very vital in a mission where you have to deal with a supreme amount of reanimation protocols, for example, and take out that orb or the Lord or something. That works. Now, obviously, this is a little bit risky, but sniper rifle has 36 range, and it's included in their points profile, so they're not that expensive. They're okay. And the good thing is, you don't have to deploy them right away. You can deploy them exactly far enough away from your enemy, so the Ratlings have a clear shot and also cannot be targeted by other stuff that might abuse their low toughness. And then in addition to this, you can also then choose to spot like this, that you take +2 to your armor save, which brings you up to a 4+ save which is actually tankier than most guardsmen, or as tanky as guardsmen in cover. Otherwise, this 6+ save would actually be a real problem, but no, it's not very much. They pair very good with something like a Commissar to get more leadership, or even Yarrick to get reroll ones, or the sniper rifles. And yeah, they deal well with single targets that need to be removed and that are characters. Not Deadlock, nothing to say about him. He is pretty much a Bulgren, and Bulgrens are not very good. That's what I want to say about him, that's all. I wouldn't use him if it wasn't for fluff. Alright. Officer of the Fleet, another special character, has a very similar role to the Master of Ordnance, because once per battle, in your shooting phase, you pick an enemy unit other than a character, and it has to be visible. You roll a d6, on a 1 to 3 nothing happens, 4 to 5 d3 mortal wounds, and a 6 3 mortal wounds. And you can only call in on rate per turn. So very similar to the other guy, because it's once per battle, and you can only do it once per turn, so at best bring 2 or something, because otherwise it's probably you're not getting much out of them, and they are not as expensive as you would think, but it's still, I mean, it's a 50-50. 1 to 3 nothing happens. So they can work. They are okay. If you want to have more units on the ground so you can drop more Tempestus, he's great, because why not? Can just get more of them. And then he can pick a unit at the start of the shooting phase, other than one which can fly, so a ground target, and you reroll hit rolls of 1 for any Aeronautica Imperialis, which is only 1, which is the Valkyrie. The Valkyrie and the Vendetta, obviously, Forgewood wants it. Valkyries are very, very expensive still. Still decent as a transport. Pretty tanky in terms of survivability for flyers. But their horrible basic skill still makes their weaponry pretty eh. High-strike missiles are pretty okay, I think. But they're only one shot, and that's a big problem. One shot from a model that hits on a 4+ is okay, but not so much. The good thing about it is the graph shoot insertion, so you can disembark models at any point where moved over. And this is a way to bring in special weapons and all that stuff that cannot deep strike. But then again, might ask yourself why I'm not taking Tempestus then. I think they just deal more damage, and in the end they are cheaper than putting special weapon squads in the Valkyries, I think. I know, I don't see it. There is other flyers that are certainly very good, such as the Storm Raven gunship, but the Valkyrie is not one of them. Alright, that's it. So to sum it up, get more conscripts. Conscripts are really good. You're buffing them very, very nicely. What I didn't mention here is the Astra Militarum Telepathica, but you can get a spell that gives them +1 armor, which I will review another time, because this will get too long. But still, the thing is there. You can buff them with Commissars, Orders. You can get Saint Celestine if you want to. You can get the Commissar Yarrick, for example, to reroll once. And you can also get something like a different buff mechanic from Mistorum Priest for 2 attacks or something like that. So they can be kitted out very versatile. I like heavy weapon teams. I like Leman Russ's, yes, maybe. I don't know. A little bit mixed. Fast attack slot is not so good, I think. And the heavy support slot got a little bit nerfed, but we have to see what happens in the Codex. They have the potential to do something, but they're not doing it yet, I'd say. Alright, that was it. I hope you enjoyed watching. If so, leave a like. Leave a comment if you have questions. I'll answer them. And other than that, happy wargaming.